Okay, hello dear friends. Good morning, good day to you. We are continuing on our series of unsung heroes, people in the Bible that are very rarely spoken of. Today we're going to look at a name which we may have heard of, but perhaps we don't know much of. This is none other than Mordecai. Where do we read about Mordecai? For those of you who have heard the name, you probably are thinking to yourself, oh, I think I read about him in the book of Esther. You're right if you thought that. So Mordecai was actually Esther's caretaker. Now, Esther, we know, when you read the book of Esther, Esther was an orphan, and Mordecai was actually her uncle who took her under his wing and brought her up. You read about this in Esther chapter 2, verses 5 until 7. Now, why is Mordecai such an important person to look at? You see, he was the cousin of a father to a future queen. When Mordecai took over being a caretaker for Esther, never in his wildest dream would he have imagined that this young girl is one day going to be the queen. But he showered her with love and affection and brought her up with the fear of God. That's the most important thing. Now, actually the meaning of Mordecai, it means warrior. He was not a fighter, he was not a man of war, but he was a warrior for God. Why? Because he stood for what was right, and he was always looking after the best interests of people. He felt what the people felt. He was hungry and thirsty for God to answer the prayers of his people. So he was a warrior in that respect, not a fighter, but somebody who would stand and protect and look after everyone, just as how he looked after Esther. He was a God-fearing man who called his niece Esther to stand up and fulfill her role in God's plan. We know about Queen Esther and how she was a blessing to the people of the land, how she saw the plans of the enemy and how she called out a fast, and because of everything that she did, God turned favor towards her. Now, what are some of the lessons that we can learn from Mordecai as we read about him? You can read about him in the chapters in Esther. Now, for Mordecai, we learn that when he did something, it was not for rewards. When he did what was right, he didn't go around with a hailer and telling everybody, I'm doing what is right, I'm standing up for righteousness. He didn't do that. When he saw the people was in danger, he went to Esther and spoke to Esther and told her, Esther, you have to do something about it. If you don't do something about it, God will choose someone else, but you and your household, something will happen to you. You will perish. You will have to answer God for it. He was trying to direct Esther to God. So when we do things, let's not do things for rewards' sake. Let's do it because it is the right thing to do. Because at the end of the day, God knows how to reward you. He knows what to do so that your effort will not go in vain. How do we know that God will reward you for what you do? If you read it, Esther chapter 6 verse 1 to 3, it says, that night the king could not sleep. Imagine, God caused the king to have a sleepless night for Mordecai. It carries on to say, so one was commanded to bring the book of the records of the chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, the doorkeepers who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. Then the king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? And the king's servants who attended to him said, nothing has been done for him. Imagine, when God wants to reward you, He will bring sleepless nights to people. He will actually know what to do so that your name is lifted up. Because of what God did, Mordecai's efforts were recognized. And the final thing we learned about Mordecai was he was a very good mentor. You would read in Esther chapter 2 verse 11 that after Esther was chosen and prepared to meet the king, to be his future wife, it says Mordecai was outside the gate daily inquiring about Esther. This is a sign of a good mentor. he was somebody who cared so much that even though Esther was there, he was there to ask about her. So, can we learn from Mordecai in our lives and put this in place so that we become chosen vessels of God, a good example to people around us? Have a blessed day and read about Mordecai.